In Hajime no Ippo, pressure is not just a condition, it is the real opponent. You see it in the way fighters sweat before the bell, in the way their eyes tighten when the crowd gets loud, and in the way every round seems to squeeze the next choice out of them. The series keeps returning to that moment where a boxer realizes there is no perfect answer left. He has to act now. He has to trust his training now. He has to live with the result now. That is what makes the story so gripping. Even before a punch is thrown, the pressure is already working. It is already testing the mind, the nerves, and the body all at once. And once you start looking at the fights this way, you can see that the real drama is never just who hits harder. It is who can still think when everything is closing in. One of the clearest examples of fighting under pressure comes when Itagaki does the last thing the crowd expects. For most of the bout, he stays elusive. He moves, he evades, he keeps Imai from settling in. It looks safe. It looks like control. But control can become a trap if the boxer starts believing that distance alone will save him. Then Itagaki makes his choice. He stops running. He steps into infighting. He closes the gap and forces the match into the ugliest, most dangerous range possible. And that is exactly why the crowd explodes. They can feel the shift. This is no longer a boy trying to stay clean and untouched. This is a fighter deciding to face pressure head-on. His speed still matters, but now it matters inside the fire, not outside it. Even the near misses count, because they prove he can think and punch at close range without losing himself. In that one tactical choice, Itagaki turns pressure into momentum. Ippo's pressure is different, but just as brutal. His biggest weapon is his ability to explode into a punch that seems to break the normal limits of the body. But the story is careful not to make that power free. The punch costs him. It strains the pivot leg. It leaves him hurt in places the crowd cannot always see from a distance. And that means every time Ippo uses his strength, he is also gambling with what he will have left afterward. That pressure follows him beyond the fight, too. When he cannot spar, when he cannot help the others at the gym, when he has to turn down an invitation because his body is still paying the price, the emotional weight becomes obvious. He wants to be useful. He wants to keep moving forward. But pressure is not always about a rival in front of him. Sometimes it is about the frustration of being forced to recover, while everyone else keeps training. That kind of limitation can be just as painful as a punch. The story gets even more interesting when pressure appears before the fight has even started. In the waiting room, Itagaki is not the usual confident, energetic boxer the audience expects. He is tense, uncertain, quiet in a way that feels heavy instead of calm. He looks at the coming match and starts doubting whether he can survive a full 10 rounds against a heavy hitter. That fear of endurance is a form of pressure all its own. It is not dramatic in the way a bloody exchange is dramatic, but it is just as dangerous because it can poison the mind before the first bell. The coaches around him try to push him back toward belief. They remind him that the gym is behind him. They remind him that his performance matters. They remind him that doubt cannot be allowed to win before the match starts. That is a very Hajime no Ippo kind of tension, because the series understands that the body often follows the mind. If the mind folds first, the fight gets harder before it begins. Once the Rookie King finals are underway, pressure becomes visible in the most painful way possible. Itagaki is knocked to the floor multiple times, and the whole arena starts reacting like it cannot decide whether to cheer or worry. That uncertainty is part of the scene's power. People want to believe in his heart, but they can also see how much he is giving away just to stay alive in the match. And yet he keeps getting up. That matters. It matters because this is where the story turns endurance into an emotional weapon. Itagaki is not winning by looking comfortable. He is winning moments by refusing to disappear. Every return to his feet says that the fight is not over until he says it is over. Even Hoshi's presence feels amplified by that tension, because a fighter who keeps rising changes the meaning of every follow-up exchange. The crowd's mixed fear and excitement becomes a kind of pressure chamber around the ring, and Itagaki keeps forcing his way through it. If there is one thing Hajime no Ippo loves to prove, it is that defense under pressure can be just as dramatic as offense. Ippo is not always the loudest fighter in the ring. Sometimes his greatness is silent. He blocks everything. He absorbs the barrage without losing his composure. He keeps his guard tight and waits for the exact opening he needs. That is what makes the veteran bouts so nerve-wracking. The opponent can be throwing wave after wave of heavy shots, And Ippo is still there, still reading, still waiting for the right chance to answer. When that chance comes, the crowd feels it instantly. His counters land with the force of a decision finally made. The right uppercut against the veteran, the narrow gap he threads a punch through, the calm that precedes the breakthrough. These are all pressure victories. Not because Ippo is never hurt, but because he does not let the hurt decide the whole shape of the round. He stays functional inside the storm. And that is an extraordinary kind of courage. Not all pressure in Hajime no Ippo looks like a storm of punches. Sometimes it looks like a fighter smiling at you and lowering his guard. That is the kind of moment Ippo runs into against a veteran who seems almost too confident, almost too willing to invite the attack. On the surface, it feels like a gift, an opening, a challenge. But Ippo senses something more dangerous underneath it. The opponent's whole attitude suggests a plan built around force, control, and a knockout shot, waiting to be unleashed. The concern around the coconut punch changes the mood completely. Now Ippo is not just deciding whether to attack. He's deciding whether the attack will cost him the whole fight. That is pressure at its most psychological. Because the danger is hidden inside confidence. The veteran dares him to move, and the entire chapter becomes a test of whether fear will freeze the younger fighter before his own instinct can answer. One of the most important things this series ever says about pressure is that power always carries a price tag. Ippo's punches look impossible, almost superhuman, but the story never lets you forget what they do to him. The rotation, the transfer of weight, the impact through his body, the damage to the pivot leg, all of that turns power into a gamble. That is why the theme of pressure is so deeply connected to his style. He is not just trying to hurt the other man. He is trying to do it while his own body is under strain. And when the injuries stack up, the pressure becomes personal. He cannot train like normal. He cannot help the people around him the way he wants. He carries the frustration of being sidelined, of being unable to fully join the gym's forward motion, of having to live with the consequences of his own strength. In that sense, every major Ippo punch is both a victory and a warning. Kamogawa Gym is more than a training floor. It is where pressure gets translated into discipline. When fighters are tense, injured, uncertain, or overthinking, the gym becomes the place where that weight is either broken down or made manageable. Coaches push Itagaki to keep fighting. Fighters support one another. Injuries are discussed honestly instead of being romanticized away. Even the quieter scenes matter, because they show that the pressure of boxing is never just individual. Every boxer depends on a network of people who understand what it means to be afraid and keep going anyway. That is why the gym feels so alive in this story. It is a place where victories are celebrated, but also a place where limitations are acknowledged. The fighters do not pretend the pain does not exist. They learn how to move with it. That collective resilience is part of what makes the pressure in Hajime no Ippo feel earned instead of arbitrary. When you put all these scenes together, the pattern becomes impossible to miss. Itagaki's sudden infighting, Ippo's calm defense, the veteran's baiting tactics, the repeated knockdowns, the injury-laced recovery, the waiting room doubt, the crowd's emotional whiplash. All of it is one long argument about pressure. Hajime no Ippo is not just asking which boxer has the best technique. It is asking which boxer can keep his identity intact while being squeezed from every side. Can he stay aggressive without becoming reckless? Can he stay patient without becoming passive? Can he keep his speed after taking damage? Can he trust his instincts when fear tells him to freeze? That is why the story is so satisfying. Every match becomes a character test. Every body shot becomes a psychological threat. Every recovery is a small act of rebellion against the idea that pain gets the final say. And that is the real heartbeat of the series. Pressure is not something the fighters merely endure. Pressure is what defines the shape of their courage.